The views expressed in this podcast are of the presenters and the presenters only and do not represent the views, opinions, or strategies of the United States Postal Service, the National Rural Letter Carriers Association, or the National Association of Letter Carriers.
Welcome back, everybody. We have a midweek special this week. We have NALC activist Tyler Vasseur with us. And for those of you that listen to 8 Arbitration and Fed Up, you will recognize Tyler, and we are all excited to have him joining us this evening.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here. My name's Tyler Vasseur. I'm a shop steward with the National Association of Letter Carriers, Branch 9 in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And yeah, I mean, we can get right into it.
What are you doing? How did you have a movement going on right now in the NALC, and you're the one that's spearheading it. Why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I'm sure if people here have heard my interview on from 8 Arbitration with Corey Walton or from Fed Up, or maybe have seen stuff online, in NALC, we've started this movement called Build a Fighting NALC. We've done roughly once a month Zoom meetings to try to bring together, members of the NALC from across the country to try to organize and transform our union. The way that we're really getting organized now and the sort of launching pad for this was an open bargaining resolution. So as I'm sure most of you are aware, the NALC has been in contract negotiations since February of 2023. Our last contract actually expired in May of 2023, so it's going on almost a year without a contract. We're working under the old contract. This is in the context of inflation, in the context of, I think, the broader labor movement where unions are putting up a fight and winning, and getting organized publicly, and winning really sort of massive wage gains not seen in decades. And I think so all these things have come together to make, I think, the broader membership of the NELC pretty disgruntled, I think, with how things are going. And so that's, I think without, we're not getting many updates. There isn't much transparency about the bargaining process. There's no attempt to mobilize or organize the membership to put leverage on USPS to, negotiate in good faith and settle a contract quickly. And so it's in that context that we put forward the open bargaining resolution first in Branch 9 in Minneapolis and spread across the country. A little bit about the open bargaining resolution itself. It's calling for two main things, calling for more transparency, regular updates, and also on top of that, sort of to activate and mobilize the membership. It calls for the membership to be mobilized with public rallies that can bring in the broader labor movement, bring in the public, highlighting our main demands as a way to win public support, get media attention, and put some pressure on USPS to, actually settle a contract, because I just don't think it's acceptable for a contract to be expired for a year and really with no end in sight. And so that's the basics of it. It's really connected with NELC members who are looking for more transparency, but also to get active, to actually put up a fight. It's been passed by 25 branches and one state association so far. There are, at least a dozen that I know of branches who are in the process of members discussing it and probably planning on bringing it forward at upcoming general membership meetings. This is all going to go to the national convention in August, where we're going to fight for this resolution. If it gets passed there, it becomes official policy. It's a little too late for this contract, for this thing to go in place for this contract, but next time around, we'll actually, if open bargaining passes, we'll have an actual process to put up a fight and win a contract.
I do, because I remember when you first was on with Corey, and I've listened to both episodes with Ron. They're on Fed Up as well. And as on the rural side, we can relate greatly. I think an open bargaining resolution would actually be good for the rural side as well. I mean, we just started our contract negotiations in March, and ours expires in May. So we definitely, because you don't know until, oh, we have a potential contract and here's your chance of whatever. And people just, when you only have 20% of the membership even voting, it's, because we're like, oh, we're getting our raises, we're good, let's vote, and nobody else even cares. I think having something with open bargaining being able to know what we're trying to fight for or what they're trying to fight for us is definitely a great idea
Mm.
and much needed across the board. Obviously for the city side, but also I think for all the unions. I do have to agree with that. Definitely. Go ahead, Josh. You were about to say something.
I was going to pretty much touch on what you just said. I would say I can remember a few years back reading an article about where a school district up in the Northeast did closed bargain. They had closed bargaining, and the union put a stop to that by inviting a half dozen to a dozen teachers to actually come and sit in the negotiating room. And the school board was not happy about that at first. And they're like, well, you either let them sit in and hear what we're talking about, or we're not going to negotiate.
Yeah, if
So I
you
think open bargaining of this is what we're asking for. This is what the post office is countering with. And this is where, and then as it gets closer, this is what we met in the middle on. I think would give
exactly.
a lot of good faith to the craft, whichever craft it is.
Exactly. I think if you saw the UAW, United Auto Workers, the big three that strike in that contract negotiation process, or if you saw even the Teamsters at UPS, they didn't even go on strike, but they built up a strong campaign and the credibility of potential strike. But the point I'm trying to get to is both of these unions, and there's many more examples. They used public actions, did rallies, and they gave regular updates. Like I think it's pretty powerful, like you were saying to see if you saw during the build up to the negotiations at UPS with the Teamsters and UPS, the Teamsters would come out and say, "This is what UPS is offering. This is what we're fighting for." And what that can do is it can show. I mean, it can get the membership riled up and ready to get organized and fight because it can show, oh, that's what the company thinks I'm worth. If they're trying to undercut the union and offer pretty poor pay raises or not budging on other issues that is important to workers. And so I just think there's many ways for that this is beneficial to the union and beneficial for workers and can actually strengthen our position. And yeah, as well as just the overall arguments, I think for transparency. We're not asking that every single thing is broadcasted, the laundry list of hundreds of items. No, but what are our 3-4 main demands? I think that's you can really rally and mobilize people behind some solid demands and a program that can get people excited and can make people realize, oh, what can my not just what can my union do for me, but what can I do with my union? How can I get organized with my coworkers and build a stronger union that actually fights and actually wins for us?
I have to
Right. And that,
agree 100% with that.
I was saying that kind of segues into, the quote unquote ulterior motive of asking you to join us, of not only so you can spread your word, but how can we potentially transition that and get the ball rolling in a similar manner on the rural side?
Yeah, absolutely. That's one thing that I've noticed from this year. I mean, 2023 was a big year for unions, a big year for the labor movement. We saw whether it's the writers in Hollywood or, like I said, the United Auto Workers, teachers unions across the country that people are fed up with. I think inflation and the cost of living crisis is a big push, but I think people are pretty fed up with how things have been going and workers aren't going to accept the same paltry raises that we've been getting over the last decade and more. And I think it's been really inspiring to me is learning or trying to learn lessons from what other unions are doing and how they're getting organized, how they're fighting. And I think that we have a lot to learn from the broader labor movement. We definitely have a lot to learn from across the postal unions from each other, and I think we should definitely try work together more than we currently are.
I definitely agree with that. Like, it's we have myself, James, Bill, who's not with us tonight, and Toasty, who's not with us currently. I mean, we're all four of us are running for national board come August at our national convention as well. And then that's the thing, and that was a goal when we started the United We Scan podcast, was to educate our carriers and to get them involved. Like I said, when ballots go out, whether it's for our national delegates or it's to ratify a new contract, when you're only getting 20% of the membership even returning ballots, I mean, when you're getting a contract, when you have 100,000 plus, union members, and only 20% of them are voting a contract in. That's like, oh, you have 86, it passed by 86%. It was 86% of 20%. It's definitely wanting to get the people involved. And I think the transparency, especially when it comes to contract bargaining, could definitely make a difference. I definitely have to agree with you on the open bargaining.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a very real question. Like, how do you get people involved? How do you get turnout for elections or for the contract vote higher than 15-20%? I can't remember what the 2022 NALC national leadership election turnout was, but it wasn't good. I don't think it was more than 20%. But that's a big part of this open bargaining resolution. It's just one step in this direction, but I think it really one of the important parts of it is that we're looking to find creative ways to get more members active in the union and to develop, identify and develop a new layer of leaders that could get involved, because I don't think it's enough for a union leadership to say, oh, you want to get involved, just come to a union meeting. Obviously, we'll always encourage people and invite people to union meetings and make an attempt to get people out. But the reality is, for working people, we live really busy lives, especially people with families and with especially young children. We live really busy lives. Not everyone is able to come to a union meeting every month or get involved on a daily basis. But there are, I think, other ways that we can should always strive to get them to those meetings, but we should also look for creative ways to get people involved and get people activated. And if you do, just imagine how powerful it would be to at the start of contract negotiations, they're being organized in the NALC, for example. There'd be organized rallies happening across the country with our 3 or 4 main demands. You can get people out into the street. It gets people excited. It gets people motivated. It makes them realize, oh, this is what my union can do. This is what we can fight for together. And I think it can get people interested in the union. And then on top of that, like I said before, I think it would also, that's just one aspect, that sort of identifying and mobilizing members is just one aspect for how it could be beneficial for us internally. But I truly believe it would strengthen our bargaining position. USPS, if our negotiators walk into that room on the backs of, dozens even, but especially if we got, dozens and dozens of rallies happening across the country with thousands of members out on the street, with media attention, building public support, getting elected, politicians and officials out in support of us, that puts pressure on USPS, and they have to, it make it a lot more likely that we can negotiate for a strong contract, and then make it a lot less likely that it'll be drawn out for, a year, like the situation we're currently in.
You talk about empowering the craft and stuff like that. How can somebody who is listening to this podcast right now empower the carriers that are with them, especially ones that are in fear of managerial retaliation in a steward system currently that some allow management to violate and harass carriers? In some cases, stewards are in bed with management in that aspect. How would you encourage them to be in participation of this?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, to me, it's not enough just to, using NALC as an example, it's not enough just to fight for this open bargaining resolution and just win open bargaining and everything's going to be transformed and perfect after that. Like I think I see it as a part of an overall transformation of overall process of trying to transform the union. And so in some cases, if you have a local leadership that isn't putting up a fight, isn't being proactive, or is openly, in bed with management, or if you have a steward who is not doing their job, like I think that's where I think this, I think there needs to be an overall transformation of the union. New people need to step up, elect a new steward or elect a new local leadership. But it's one thing to say that. I think it's important to be, I think, sort of organized around a set of ideas or a program. It's not enough, I think, to just say, vote for me for steward because I'll be better than the other guy. I think you have to say, you have to say, what do you stand for? What are you going to fight for? How are you going to better represent us? Not just that, you can be better, but, what do you actually stand for? I think that's kind of an important aspect to it. I don't know if that answered the question completely. There's a couple things in there.
So how would you encourage somebody that's not a steward, not really fully involved in the union, to get more people to step up and be involved, get active, and things like that?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, maybe I can just give you this example. I don't know if there's any sort of initiative or any sort of organizing going on in the rural carriers union at the moment, but maybe this is a good way to talk about it is the example of out of getting the open bargaining resolution passed, we've started to organize these national monthly meetings in NALC called Build a Fighting NALC. We've gotten the last one, we had 300 people on the call. And that's a place that you don't have to be an elected or super active in the union or in an elected position to come to these meetings. I would even encourage rural carriers to come to them. They can get a sense of what we're trying to build. But the point I'm trying to get to is while there are a lot of local branch presidents, we've even had a business agent or two on, stewards, there's also a lot of rank and file members who don't have a position, aren't maybe super active in their union at the moment because they don't know how to get started. But that is a really good place to start because, we can talk about what kind of union we want to build. I've had people that bring out a person or two from their station or from their branch, and that can kind of help you connect and realize you're not alone in this. There are people across the country that are trying to organize to, fight for a better NELC. And yeah, I don't know if that fully answers your question, but I'm just trying to give an example of what we're trying to do in the NELC.
So in your office, do you have any rural carriers there?
No, not in my office. I'm like right in the middle of the city in Minneapolis.
Oh, okay. Figured I'd ask that because I'm sure people would love to know if you were interacting with rural carriers in that aspect. So in offices that have city and rural carriers, would you want rural carriers talking with the city carriers on this stuff?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think just to get back to what I was saying before, I think the broader labor movement and unions across different industries have a lot to learn from each other. I think that definitely applies to postal unions. I mean, I know there's a lot to it, but I think it's rather unfortunate that that the city and rural carriers are in two different unions. I think in a perfect world, and maybe that's something we can build towards in the future, the details can be worked out, but I honestly believe we should have one carriers union. I think we'd be stronger together versus divided, where post office can kind of play us off of each other and a sort of divide and conquer tactic. So yeah, I would definitely encourage, I think, city carriers and rural carriers to just talk to each other. What's going on in our respective unions? How can we learn from each other? I think if you have a sort of movement to reform or change or create a more fighting union in the NALC, I think that it would be strengthened if there was also a similar movement within the rural carriers union. And we can work together on things. We can learn lessons for how to fight to change both of our unions, in their respective ways. But yeah, definitely.
Speaking of working together, considering that everybody here listens to From 8 Arbitration and at least on the stage are listened to From 8 Arbitration and Fed Up, I do recall that Corey put out that you guys had a resolution for the union to go against the Delivering for America plan, which then turned around to me putting it forward on the rural side for you. Do you think things like that, where the unions work together in a common good for the Postal Service and their respective crafts, would be something that could be passed along through all the unions together and employees themselves banding together like that?
Definitely. Yeah, that resolution was actually another resolution that was first passed in Branch 9 here in Minneapolis, and now we've gotten, I don't know the exact number in NELC, but a handful of branches, and there's some momentum building around it. It's really exciting here that you put it forward. It was put forward in the Rural Carriers Union. I think absolutely. I think there was a time when all four unions bargained together. All the contracts were lined up. We bargained together, and I truly believe that you sort of united front of the different postal unions is puts us all in a better position to negotiate for a strong and leverage for a strong contract. I think that also applies to things outside of contract negotiations. That applies to, there's the DeJoy's Postmaster General Louis DeJoy's 10-year plan is sort of slowly being implemented. I would argue it's not going well, and I think the current plan as it stands is pretty destructive, both to workers' working conditions, its potential impact on clerk craft positions, the increase in commute times, and also the loss of potential loss of service for our customers because of these plans. Like there's so much to it. I think it's a destructive plan that I think all four postal unions should organize together to fight back against the bad aspects of it. And if our leadership isn't taking that initiative, I think in unions we have the ability as members to put forward ideas and organize with other members to put forward resolutions and make our unions fight on this stuff. And I think it can be really transformative for the union as a body. That whole process can be really transformative.
I know some people would say, well, it's just change. Are you guys arguing against change, or are you arguing against, just anything happening that changes what's going on? And I think you'll agree that it's not about changing things. It's about what is responsible and cost effective, not only for carriers and clerk craft and all other crafts involved, but also for the Postal Service as a whole. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I think the world's constantly changing. I don't think it's helpful for us to be against change as a concept, and that I don't think that's at all what we opposing the postal consolidation, opposing sorting and delivery centers. I don't think that is just being against change. I think any change that comes at any sort of updating or modernization of the postal service cannot come at the expense of workers' working conditions, and it cannot come at the expense of our ability to serve the American public. We're supposed to be a public service, and anything that any attempts, I think, to degrade that service, I take pretty personally myself, but also I think most postal workers would, but also I think it's our duty to the public as workers to fight for a fully functional, relatively affordable postal service. And if I see that that's under threat, if I think workers see that's under threat, I think it's our duty to organize and try to stop that. So yeah, no, just to say again, I don't think it's just being against change for the sake of it, because I want everything to be the way it used to be or something, but because any change should not come at the expense of working conditions or customer access to facilities or any of that.
So we did get a comment/question. It says, years ago, the letter carrier steward used to put up posters with what was happening in the union. Do they still do that? And it says, our local letter carrier steward doesn't do that. And would a program of publishing in print what the union is up to help the rural craft? So I think the question is, in the past, they used to put up on the bulletin board signage of what's going on, but at least in their office it stopped. Is that something that, as far as you know, still something that's happening? If not, is that something you think they should go back to? And how do you feel it would benefit or not either craft?
Yeah, I think that would be. I think that that should definitely be something that is done. I haven't gotten one. I'm the steward of my station. I haven't gotten a poster that has an update. They talk about what bills we are lobbying for in Congress and updates with the negotiations and other stuff like that. I haven't gotten one. So I can't say that the NALC leadership stopped sending them out or anything. I just know personally I haven't got one. But to that point, I think how could that be used in an even better way to sort of organize and update the membership and organize the membership around the ideas of what the union's fighting for? Like, when I would get those, it would be pretty vague for the most part. Like, maybe they would have specifics about upcoming convention. Here is the date and time. But like last time when I can remember, it might still be up at my station, to be honest with you. It was just like the contract negotiations started, and maybe some very vague stuff about the process. Maybe some, very vague stuff about, like, in general, we're asking for wage increases, but like nothing specific, nothing that really, I think, can excite members. I think I would want to see the union leadership use posters and updates like that is for them to be an organizing tool. Like, I think posters should get sent out, and it shouldn't, I think that union leadership should say, don't just put this poster up, put the poster up and at your stand-up talk. And every morning, give members an update. This is what the union's doing. Give people that sort of daily interaction with the union, and it's working, so that even if they can't participate in it personally, that they are getting sort of there's that transparency about what we're doing. We're a membership-based organization, a union. Members should get regular updates and have some sense of what we're doing. But yeah, you said at your station, the comment said at their station, they haven't seen the NALC steward put one up in a while. So maybe they haven't sent one out in a while. And if so, I think, yeah, that's a problem. I think that's sort of a basic way that we could get information out to members.
Another question is, what do you think is the best and worst parts of the NRLCA and the NALC?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think one of the best parts is that we both have unions that represent how many members are in that rural carriers union?
What are we at?
Over 100,000.
Over
I
100,000.
would say
Wow.
120,000, I think.
Okay, so that's still pretty good because the NALC is, I can't remember exactly how many, 200 over 200,000 active members. But I mean, there's hundreds of, we both unions have hundreds of thousands of members across every part of this country. We represent workers in every, almost every community in this country. We have interactions with, communities and people in every corner of the country. And I think that the potential for that is really powerful if that sort of power and leverage would be utilized a little bit more. My problem with, I mean, the other thing is like, yeah, I'm very, very thankful and glad to have a union for basic protection on the job, or workplace rights. The idea of having a contract, I could not imagine going back to a workplace without union protection. You're an at-will employee. If you're a manager or supervisor doesn't like you, they can find any reason to fire you for the most part. I think having that basic protection actually encourages people to, feel a little more connected to work, maybe stick around for longer if, in the best case scenarios. But, what things I don't like about them is I think that and this goes for the labor movement as a whole, but it's, for our unions, I think our leadership could do a better job of trying to actually activate and mobilize the membership. That they could do a better job of putting up a fight against attacks from management. DeJoy's 10-year plan is coming out. I don't think it's good that our unions are just going along with it. I think that we should, if there's aspects of the plan that aren't good for workers or for their customers and the American public, I think that we should oppose them and organize against them. And if that's not happening, I think that's a real problem. So yeah, I mean, good and the good parts is I think there's huge potential for us to get organized to fight for better wages and working conditions that can really positively impact the lives of hundreds of thousands of workers in this country, or members of our unions. The parts I don't like as much, yeah, it's just I don't think that's fully being utilized. I don't think the membership is being mobilized. I don't think the membership's being told about what's happening necessarily, and not fully, yeah, being used to our abilities.
So in talking about the unions like that, we had earlier talked about them joining together and maybe even making one union out of it. Now I know there are some city carriers that like it hourly, some city carriers that would love to be evaluated like the rural craft. There are some rural carriers that would like to be hourly, and rural carriers that like the evaluated system. We came out with the rec system lately, and of course our president was so kind to tell the rural craft that they've had it too good for too long, and that's why 66% of the craft lost money on the first Rex evaluation. But do you think that there should be, in that situation, if both crafts merged, there should be a hybrid of that system, or should everybody be hourly with overtime? Because one of the biggest benefits that a lot of rural carriers have is that they don't have to take other routes out after they completed their route, unless with the current MOU they want to and volunteer to. How would you sell the fact of merging the two unions?
Yeah, I think first of all, I think it's pretty I've heard that before, that your union president had made some comment about rural carriers have had it too good for too long. I think that's unacceptable for a union leader to say something like that. I think unions are supposed to fight for, obviously within some sort of reason, but like are supposed to fight for the best possible wages and conditions that workers can have at their respective companies or workplaces. And so to say, I don't know, deal with it. You lost potentially tens of thousands of dollars. I think that's pretty unacceptable. I honestly was pretty shocked the first time I heard that. I thought it was maybe an exaggeration. But in terms of hourly versus the way that rural routes are set up, where it's just you get paid per day, right? It's just like I think that could be worked out. The details I don't know exactly. I haven't really sat down and thought, okay, how exactly would this be worked out? But some sort of hybrid could potentially be worked out, or some sort of new process could be worked out that I think would be mutually beneficial for both sides. On top of that, I think like the idea of mandatory overtime in the NALC is pretty unacceptable. for city letter carriers. I think that's something that going forward, the NALC needs to fight back against. I don't think it's acceptable that workers would be forced with work that on top of your 8 hours, like or what should be your normal day. Every worker should have the right to, if they want to work overtime, they can. Great, that's work overtime. But every worker should have the right to an 8-hour day. It's a right that was fought for, over 100+ years ago, and it's kind of insane that in 2024 we have workers who are forced with sometimes 4 hours of overtime on top of their 8-hour route. That just does not give you a work-life balance. And so I would say any sort of merging of the unions or anything would have to come with figuring out the exact details of that stuff. But really, mandatory overtime is something that needs to be fought back against and ended for city carriers. And the broader point I was thinking about is just how much stronger we would be together. Because right now, if we're not negotiating together, the post office can kind of play the unions off of each other. And I think workers are much stronger when they're united. And I think one carrier union or one postal union would definitely be much stronger than having 4 different unions with different interests all kind of being played off of each other. Now, the details can be, again, I think the details of that could be worked out at some, that would be mutually beneficial to everyone. But yeah, I'm generally in favor more of unity than it being broken up into a bunch of different unions.
As a compromise to that, instead, would you be opposed to maybe having the NALC and the NRLCA doing negotiations together again, like they did in the past, where all the crafts came in and negotiated at the same time? Would you be opposed to the two crafts sitting down and being like, we're going to work together to get a beneficial contract for both crafts at the same time, instead of us waiting on the NALC to probably go through arbitration at this point to do our contract negotiations at the end? Would you be opposed to that?
Oh yeah, I would. I think that's what should happen. I think that the NRLCA, the NALC, the APWU, the mail handlers union, I think that we should all negotiate our contracts together. As part of this, to bring back to the open bargaining resolution and the movement we're building around that. If that goes into effect, like that will be a policy of the NALC that starting next contract negotiation we're doing at the beginning, before negotiations even start, before our negotiators walk into that room and look at their management counterpart in the eye, we have organized rallies across the country with our main demands that get people mobilized, gets the media support behind us, gets the labor movement support behind us, gets the public on our side. I think that would be even more powerful if at the same time NRLCA is doing it, APWU is doing it, that we do organized sort of joint rallies, to bring together all of the unions that represent all the workers at the post office. I think that would give us both a much better bargaining position than we currently have.
Here's a question I posed to the co-host a while ago, and I'm going to ask you just on what your thoughts are in regards to with negotiation. Let's say they send you out a tentative agreement to vote on, and they tell you you will get a 20% increase over the length of the contract, but to offset that, you no longer have COLA increases. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, I've often been told that if you get something, you have to give something away. And I can understand that we're coming out of a period of time where that's very well could be true, that for unions to get anything, they had to give something else up. I don't fully buy that argument. I think negotiations and winning demands and winning, wage increases and better conditions, it's a question of power. And it's a question of how well organized you are as a union. And so if you're if a union, if the NALC is not mobilizing members, isn't building leverage, isn't building public support, and yeah, I do believe that to get something, we have to give something away. But if we're building power, we're using the leverage and the power of the hundreds of thousands of members, we're building public support, and we're putting pressure on USPS, I think that you could win a good pay raise, a 20% raise, a 25% raise, like the United Auto Workers won, and without having to give up COLA or having to give up other concessions.
Speaking of contract negotiations, I know that when we went into these contract negotiations, we had over 400 resolutions submitted by the craft, and our president turned around and said he would take 20 to 30, but the closer to 20, the better, to the bargaining table. Does your leadership do something similar to that, or is there any word on that? Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, I believe so. I'm not super familiar with the ins and outs. I'm still learning a lot about the process of how resolutions are brought forward into negotiations. But yeah, I mean, I know that there's it's a similar process, I'm sure. You have to choose which ones you emphasize and which ones you go on. But yeah, without knowing the exact ins and outs, I believe that's how it's done for us as well.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you knew if your president would turn around and say that out of the over 400, we'll use ours as a reference, over 400 resolutions, he would take 20 to 30, closer to 20 of them, even though a, a lot of them are different from the ones that were submitted. Guaranteed there are duplicates in there, so that would lower the number, but it's more than 20 or 30. So did you hear anything about what they would be taking to the bargaining table? Like they would take so many resolutions or anything like that?
No, I don't know any specifics, but the other thing is just like the transparency isn't super great. That's part of what the open bargaining resolution is trying to address, and so we're not entirely sure. Like even the what they're going into negotiations asking for. If you look at the speech or the sort of that was put out there by our president Brian Renfro at the beginning of contract negotiations, it's super vague. Like it doesn't really go into much detail. It kind of just talks about the process. And so, yeah, to be honest with you, yeah, members of the NALC aren't entirely sure what our leadership and what our negotiation team is going in there and asking for. We have to rely on leaks, and we have to rely on sort of friendly business agents to sort of let us know what they may be asking for. But again, I think that doesn't create a position of where the membership has a lot of confidence in our leadership. If we don't even know what we're going in there and fighting for, and that's what one aspect of what this open bargaining resolution, seeks to change.
That does sound a bit familiar. Our president put out a video that they taped of his opening statement in negotiations, and it was very vague, to be polite.
Yeah,
we
just to talk about that, just to speak to that a little bit, I think what we're trying to do with this open bargaining resolution is really change the way that we do this. I think what we're seeing right now, both from the NRLCA and NALC leadership, is I think kind of an old and outdated way of doing things, where they say the NALC leadership has come out and said that the public opinion has no effect on things, which I don't think is true. But they also have said that the best way to get a good contract is to have a good relationship with your management counterpart. Now, I'm not saying you have to go in there and yell and scream and not have some decorum or something. That's not what we're saying. But I don't think that a strong personality. I hope we have really good personalities on our negotiation team, but that alone is not enough to win a strong contract. You have to have, the power of a union comes from the members that they represent, the work that we do every day, our ability to, use that membership to actually put leverage on management. Workers in general are the ones that do the work every day. If we don't work, if we say no, we're not going to work until we get a good contract, that is actually, I think, where the ultimate leverage comes from. But yeah, I just think that this sort of outdated way of saying you just have to get the best negotiators in there and then we'll be successful. We're seeing real time how that does not work.
I think in that opening statement video, James, would you say it was 4 times our president addressed him as Lewis?
Yeah, in the opening statement, he addressed him as Lewis 3 times, showing a personal relationship with the Postmaster General. On top of that, he said delivering for America, either at delivering for America or delivering for America plan 9 times, and literally barely touched on a lot of the real issues that carriers are facing, including workplace harassment, benchmarking of our rural route evaluated compensation system inputs that carriers do, things like that, where management literally is coming down on carriers and harassing them over benchmarking things that are supposed to be exactly what's going on your route. They're out there. They were part of our contract was they were supposed to teach us when there's a change in our work procedures. Rex was supposed to be taught to us. It didn't get taught to us unless somebody actually cared to do so. And it just feels like in the end, we're dealing with untrained management and union leaders who just say, it's on the website, you should have gotten the information from there, not worrying about the carriers that were unable to because they're not dues paying members of the craft. They pulled their dues. Like we talked about this on our podcast, how in just 4 states, this came direct from our president, in 4 states, we had over 400 carriers pull their dues. This wasn't carriers lost for quitting. This wasn't carriers who got hired on and didn't start paying dues. These were carriers that chose to pull their dues from the union because they were sick of the stuff going on. How do you feel about carriers who are pulling their dues to try and show that they're unhappy with what's going on in the union?
Yeah, I think it's, in one sense, it's understandable. I even had people at my station, just like, I don't know if it was last week or the week before, but a guy at my station said, Tyler, hey, what's going on with our contract, and why haven't we heard updates? And, we're kind of talking about it, and I told him about, I was bringing up, that's why we're fighting for this open bargaining resolution, and we've been doing these organizing meetings. And he said, his response was, and I've heard this a lot, seen it online, and Corey's talked about it. I was like, well, what if we all pulled our dues? That would send a message to the leadership, right? I can understand where people are coming from when they think that. I don't think it's effective. It's not ultimately going to. I don't think it's ultimately going to change the direction of the union. And I don't think it's the most effective tool. Unfortunately, there's no quick fix. Like, there's nothing I can say, do this, and tomorrow your union is going to be better represent you and be more effective and put up more of a fight. It's going. I think you have to explain to people that it's going to take a process of getting organized. What you all are doing with this podcast is one example of how you can get people organized around a set of ideas to change things. So I would really encourage people. Even if things look bleak, I would encourage people, do not pull your dues. Use this sort of moment that may seem bleak. Use this to actually organize and talk to your fellow union members, your coworkers at your station, about what kind of union we could have. And I think when unions actually put up a fight and win, that is like a really good example that we can point to of like, look, this isn't just something I'm making up or something I think could happen. We're seeing it happen in real time. And to me, to bring it up again, the United Auto Workers and their strike and their huge contract win this last fall is the perfect example of a union that was in a really bad situation. They had leaders that were going to literally are in prison for fraud because they were taking bribes from the companies. And they were able to elect a reform leader, get organized, and win the best contract they've had in decades, 25% wage increases, and a number of other things. And I would say that is the best way forward, not pulling your dues, but actually getting organized to transform the union going forward.
Okay. Well, I don't know how up on this you are, but I know last year there was a group of rural carriers that, as in my opinion, and I think my the co-hosts kind of have similar thoughts on it, were misguided, but did rally and unify by calling for a decertification of the NRLCA. I think they had of the almost 40,000, give or take, signatures they needed to call for a vote. They ended up with over 10,000 signatures on petitions. So it's not like we can't, and I'm going to ask you what your thoughts on that premise is. So it's not like we can't get people to unify and stand up and join in. It's the atrophy that a lot of people just don't want to get involved.
Yeah. That was a pretty big thing. I remember. I'm ultimately glad it didn't go through the decertification. I think I would point to the need for, get organized and fight for new leadership and leadership elections like you have coming up. I think, but importantly, you can't just exclusively focus on a top-down approach. Leadership is really important, obviously, but we need a sort of broader membership or rank and file organizing. That's what we're trying to do with these Build a Fighting NALC Zoom meetings. We're trying to bring together members to get organized, to try to get the broader membership organized around ideas. I think you have to identify the main issues, main demands that people care about, and use that to get people activated. And just on the last thing you were saying, there's always going to be you're never going to be able to reach everyone. There's always going to be some people who just will not pay attention no matter what, or it's going to take a lot to get them to pay attention. But there is, I think, most people will get involved or will pay attention if you give them a reason to. That being said, you're never going to have, in the NALC, we're never going to have 200,000 people on a Zoom meeting to talk about well, never say never, but like it's very unlikely that we're going to get 100% of the membership on a monthly Zoom meeting to talk about the direction of our union, but you can get several hundreds, you can get thousands, and that smaller core group can play a really influential role and can play the role of being a sort of smaller cog that can turn the bigger wheel that is the membership. And so I think I always try to tell people that we don't, yeah, we only had 300 people on a Zoom meeting, but at the same time, holy shit, we had 300 people on a Zoom meeting that want to get organized. Those 300 people know, each one of them know 5 people who know 5 people who know 5 people in the union, that they can disseminate these ideas about reform, about transforming the union, about putting forward new ideas. And so I would say, just like the pulling the dues or decertification, I don't think those are effective tactics. I would discourage that. I would say that we need to just get organized around these ideas and transform our unions going forward. I think it's really possible, and I think the next few years will show just how much we can change things when we get organized and put our minds to it.
Okay. In regards to with the Zoom meetings, someone had asked earlier about wanting to join in. So at your leisure, if you'll send me the link and we'll post it in our Discord for any of our our listeners that want to join your next Zoom meeting.
Absolutely, yeah. You're all welcome. We have, it's definitely majority NALC members, but I've encouraged, I know a couple APWU members that have joined. I would encourage people, you're all welcome to come, even if it's just to listen in. I think you can see what it's like, and I would encourage some sort of thing like that to happen in the Rural Carriers Union as well. Yeah, everyone is welcome. I'll make sure you get that information. The next one we're having is on June 2nd.
June what?
June 2nd, Sunday, June 2nd.
Okay. There was, towards our last topic, someone had commented, you can't make people care about things they don't want to care about. And then there was a question, how does the NALC vote for their national delegates for the national convention? And do you guys have a ton of retirees attend your convention?
Yeah. So do you, before I ask that, how do you elect your national leaders? Or do you elect your national leaders off of a delegate system?
Off the delegate system, yes.
Okay. Yeah.
It's been shot down every time we've tried to get the one member, one vote resolution.
That's are you familiar with the history of how that was won in NALC? Because I think it's really instructive for how that was won. So we used to have a delegate system in NALC as well. Coming out of the 1970 strike, there was a huge movement, and really a national reform caucus was formed, which is an organization, a group within the union that's fighting to transform and change the direction of the union. It was called the Rank and File Caucus. And so coming out of the 1970 strike, for years, the Rank and File Caucus organized, and in, I think it was 1976, they won. They got a resolution passed at the 1976 convention for one member, one vote. Out of that, they were able to then get Vince Zambrano, who was one of the main strike leaders from New York City, get him elected to national office. So it was out of the momentum coming from the 1970 strike and all of the way that just transformed the union, the way that just that got a whole new generation of activists started in the NALC, and they used that momentum to win one member, one vote, and ultimately elect the strike leader as our president, who was the president for the next, I don't know, 20 or 30 years. And so, I think it's not impossible for that to happen within the rural carriers, but I think it's really important that would take some organizing. I think it's totally possible, and I would advocate that be done. In terms of how do we elect delegates from our branches, to be honest with you, NALC Branch 9, you have a certain number of delegate slots based on how many members you have. In Branch 9, we didn't even have enough people to fill up all those slots. And so if you signed up to be a delegate, you were a delegate. I don't quote me on this. I don't know the exact numbers, but it was like, say we had slots for 60 delegates and like 49 people signed up to be delegates. So all 49 are just automatically delegates. But if there were, the way I understand it, if there were more people, say we had 60 slots and 80 people signed up, then I believe there would be elections. I don't know how exactly those are run, if it's at the general membership meeting or if it's, a mail-in ballot or what it is exactly. But I believe that it would be an election if more people signed up than there are slots. But for the most part, if you signed up to be a delegate, you are a delegate.
Now, I know, talking with some of the city carriers in my area, they have there's a requirement where you have to be at so many meetings. Is that just a local thing, or is that a national?
Say that you said that's the case in the rural carriers, or
No. The city carriers in my area, I know they have to attend, like, you guys have one union meeting a month. They have to attend at least 10 of those meetings.
Mm.
And I'm just
Yeah,
throwing those
no.
numbers out there
Yeah,
to be
yeah, no.
eligible to be a delegate for national.
Gotcha. Yeah, that could be a local bylaws thing for that specific branch. In
Okay.
branch nine, if you make it, there's 24 meetings in a 2-year period. In that 2-year period, if you make it to 18 out of 24 general membership meetings, you can get up to a certain point registration and travel paid for. And so that's kind of a way to encourage people to show up, especially the most active members. You can get travel and registration paid for the convention, or at least a majority of it paid for. And so I don't believe you don't have to make it to 18 out of 24 meetings in that 2-year period to be a delegate, but in order to get funding, you do.
Gotcha. For us, each state constitution and bylaws vary on your compensation, but starting in December through now, the current month, National Magazine, it has a nomination form with a post office box for your state that you have to submit that you want to be nominated to be on the ballot to become a delegate, and you have 50 days before your state convention to get that into the post office box. After, then the state will make up a ballot and mail it out to all the members. And we vote on, for example, I'm in North Carolina. We have, I think it's about 60 delegates to the National Convention. So let's say there's 85 names on there. I can vote for up to 60 names and mail in my ballot. And then at the state convention, they will announce who our delegates are in order of the most votes down to the least votes. And anyone below, 61 through 84 are alternate. So you can still go as an alternate. And if enough people, for whatever reason, drop out, you move up the list as people come off, say they're not going to make it.
Wow.
For one reason or
That's
another.
60 delegates total at the convention, or 60 from where you are in North
From North
Carolina?
Carolina.
Okay, I thought,
We
oh my
have
God.
about 1,200 total delegates across the country, and Puerto Rico.
Yeah, our delegate system basically is based off of one delegate per 100 members per state.
Gotcha. Okay.
So yeah, that's, do you guys have a lot of retirees that get in on going to your national conventions as delegates?
Oh, yeah, that's right. That was the second part of that question. As far as this will be actually my first convention. I've been at the post office for 6 years. I haven't been able to make it out to one before. 2020, obviously, there was no convention, and then just didn't make it out to the 2022 convention. But I can imagine that, yes, there are. And as far as I know, retirees have the same voting rights when it comes to national leadership elections. I'm sure that goes for the convention as well. But can't vote on a contract if a contract comes to a vote.
Yeah, because that's the most thing I've noticed, because I've been on the national side for the rural side with the conventions. My first national convention was 2018, and I can recall, I don't remember if it was 2022 or 2019, but they're going through and they're recognizing the leave replacements that are there, and they're recognizing this group, and then they ask the retirees to stand up, and when 2/3 of your convention floor stands up as retirees, it's kind of disheartening in a way. I mean, it's nice. We've got some awesome retirees that fight for what's going on now, but we have some that are just really past their prime.
Sure. Yeah, I think there's definitely space. I think it's a really good thing that we have. It sounds like it's the same in the NRLCA as well, but in the NALC we have, retiree members that you can continue to pay dues. I think it's really cheap. It's like $5 a month or something. I can't remember exactly what it is, but that you can continue to be a member of the union even after you retire. I think that's a good thing. I think we have a lot to learn. If you've been active in the union for a long time, arguably you have a lot of knowledge, and it can be used for good, and that can be used to be passed down to new emerging generations of activists and active union members. But if the majority of a union meeting is retirees, then the union isn't, I think, fully representing the active carriers, and I think that imbalance can create problems, because maybe not everyone's aware of the current issues, and so I think there needs to be a combination of the knowledge and the experience retiree members or older union members who've been around for a long time, but that needs to be combined with the energy of young members, and needs to be used to help develop a new layer of leadership, a new layer of active members. And so I think if that gets thrown out of balance one way or the other, that isn't super healthy for a union. But if you can find that balance, I think that can be really actually beneficial for the union as a whole.
I have to agree with you on that one. I definitely, I feel that. Like I said, we have some awesome retirees that are fighting the good fight, but at the same time, I think we have some that are just taking a place that could be somebody that is currently carrying, whether it's a leave replacement or a full-time carrier that wants to be involved, but unfortunately, because again, it comes down to delegate ballots and name recognition. They may not, their name not be recognized, so they don't get as many votes as the person that's been retired for 10, 15 years and is still active, sort of active, I want to say. You know what I mean? It's that's where the disheartening comes in, is that when you have that many retirees that are going just to go visit with their friends, that's the only time of year that they see them. It's like, well, you're retired. You could see them at any time you wish to do it, but now you're doing it on union dime.
Sure, yeah, I could see how that would be a problem. Yeah.
So what's one message that you could give rural carriers to not only benefit your movement, but to engage them in starting their own movement for the rural side? What would you tell them?
Yeah, I would say I would love to see a similar movement start. What's happening in NALC is really exciting. We still have a long ways to go. I think we're on the right path, and we've taken really important steps in that direction. We still have a long ways to go. I think I would love to see a similar movement in the NRLCA, in APWU, in the Mail Handlers Union. I want to see this. I would love to see this in all the postal unions. I think it would only be beneficial for all of us fighting for reform, fighting for more fighting unions, fighting for change. It would benefit us all if we're if there's a similar movement in each of the unions, that we can work together on common goals and get organized and fight back. And so I would say, it's not like, I would say rural carriers find what are the main issues that impact rural carriers' lives. Like what do people want to get organized around? What do people want to fight around? And I think find those things and try to get organized around them, whether it's resolutions for the convention, or whether it's workroom floor issues that at United We Scan that you can give voice to, the way Corey has given a really important voice from Ada Arbitration for the workroom floor issues and broader issues of the union and in the NALC. Like, find those things and try to get organized around them. I don't think you can sort of copy and paste everything, but hey, is our rural carriers pissed off about closed bargaining? Do you think you could start a movement for open bargaining in the rural carriers union? I think that'd be fantastic. But maybe there's other issues that are more important. I would say, I would definitely say I would love to see reform movements and organizing amongst the rank and file membership in the rural carriers union. It would only benefit us in the NALC, as well as benefiting yourselves.
I was just looking to see if there was any other questions in here real quick. UAW figured out how to time their contract negotiations with the big three simultaneously. Would it be advantageous to all postal union to time their contract negotiations to coincide at the exact same time? I think we kind of touched on that a little bit. I don't know if you wanted to redolve into that or elaborate a little more on that.
Yeah, we did talk about it a little bit, but yeah, I would say yes. I think that I absolutely agree. We used to bargain together. I think, unfortunately, management was able to sort of use divide and conquer tactics to say, oh, if you negotiate separately, then you can bargain for more because you don't want to be with them, because if you're with them, then you might make less, because whatever. No, I think that is a divide and conquer tactic that was effectively used against the postal unions, and I think we are weaker because of it. I would absolutely argue and fight for us timing up our contracts so that at the same time that when you're in contract negotiations, leverage and building power and mobilizing the workers at the postal service, that is where our strength would come from. And I think if you have all four unions putting pressure and using that leverage against the postal service at the same time, it would only benefit us.
Would a push for public information spread help? Like at the street level, most citizens support their usual carrier.
Yeah, do you mean like would getting information about what we're fighting for? out into the public? Would that help? Is that what you're asking?
I think that's what the question is. Would a push for public
Yeah.
information spread help?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, again, like we're a public institution. We're public sector workers. We provide a service to the American public. We need public support for this stuff, and I think I think everyone, working class people across the country are all facing the rising cost of living. They're facing the really detrimental effects of inflation, where prices are almost 20% higher than they were in 2019, where fuel, gas prices are like 30% higher than they were in 2019. Like, everyone's feeling that. And if we go out, and what I've seen especially over the last year, is that when workers and unions go out and say, this is unacceptable, we are going to fight, we're going to get organized, and we're going to fight for the raises that we deserve, because if we don't make more than 20% raises, we're taking pay cuts. That's unacceptable. We want to fight for better wages, better working conditions. That will make people, I think, that'll inspire people, and will have a lot of public support, and that will only help us with negotiations. Postal Service and postal workers are one of the most highly rated, have one of the highest approval ratings of any government agency. And I can just imagine in a situation like that, I could just go around. While I'm doing my route, I chat with people as they're out on their porch, or front desks at businesses, and just let them know what we're fighting for. I guarantee you that sort of support we could build it really easily, and then we could use that to sort of help leverage pressure against management to help settle a contract sooner rather than later, with decent raises for workers, and gains in working conditions, other things.
As we're winding this down for the evening, what would be the one statement you would make to any carrier, rural carrier or city carrier, any carrier, about the benefits of being in the union if they're currently non-dues paying?
I think your question is, why should they sign up to join and become a dues paying member?
Yeah. I think ultimately the underlying basis for all of this is that workers alone, without the protection of a union, without the organization of a union, we're rather atomized. We're separated from each other. If you don't have a union at all, you're at the will of the employer. You could be fired basically for anything, right? That is sort of like, I think, the most basic aspect of how most people see the union. But I think it goes beyond that, and I think that the best way that we can secure material gains and better wages and better working conditions, the best way that workers can do that is by being organized in unions. And if we have bad leadership, then we need to get organized and fight for better leadership, reform our unions, put forward resolutions, and put forward ideas that the union can take up, and be proactive and fight for the membership. That is the only way that I think working class people historically, and even in modern day, that we've been able to get ahead, that we've been able to create, the basics of a decent life. My dad always said, I grew up in a union house. For my dad, he's worked in block plants his entire life, and he's worked just manual labor. And he's always said, the only reason, he taught us this growing up, the only reason we have this house, the only reason we have cars, and we have the ability to provide a decent life for you kids, me and my two other brothers, the only reason we have that is because of the union. So he's instilled in me from a very young age that the only reason working class people have basic rights in the workplace, even if they have been sort of whittled away here and there, is because of unions. And I think the only way to get back what we've lost, and the only way to win more, whether it's wages, working conditions, the only way to do that is to organize and be a part of a union and fight to build a stronger union, get more fighting leadership, and get as much as possible, get the membership involved, paying attention. I think that's the only way forward. It's the only way that we can really make our material lives better.
I do want to say thank you for allowing us the time to have you on and to spread your word. And I do look forward to hearing your name in the future for your national board in one capacity or another.
I definitely appreciate it. I really appreciate you having me on. I think any opportunity to get this message out, it's the only way that this movement has been built and has grown in the NALC, and it's the only way that I think we're going to. I think the best thing that we have is each other, where we can trade experiences and trade lessons, and learn from both wins and losses, victories and defeats, and learn the right lessons, and sort of build a stronger labor movement overall, build our stronger postal unions, and sort of trying to ultimately, this sounds kind of sappy, but create the world that, we want to live in, the world that I think our children, our grandchildren deserve. So yeah, I think, again, thank you for having me on. I think this has been really great.
We appreciate you coming on and talking with us about this, because you've just shown to our audience and to others that even though you're the city craft and we're the rural craft, at the end of the day, we're doing the same job. So we should all be working together, because at the end of the day, we're all in this together.
That's right.
Yes, along with the other gentlemen, we thank you very much. And like I said, from the very beginning, when I first heard you with Corey, and then again following up with Ron, it was like, he's on to something. Whether, yes, he's starting it on the NALC, but this is definitely something that we can turn around and take some of these ideas to try to build better for the NRLCA. We definitely appreciate you being on here, and definitely look forward to working with you in the future as well.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much. And we will definitely update everybody. And Tyler will get with us and give us the link for the June 2nd Zoom meetings for those of you that wish to join. I do believe my calendar may be free that weekend, and I will definitely try and get on there. Again, thank you, Tyler, and thank you for those that joined us in listening. And we're going to send off for tonight. So everybody have a good rest of the week.
All right. Take care, everyone. Thanks.